Let's reconvene, please.
Actually, I would prefer that.
Sam, just give a big.
I gotta talk to you, Sam. There should be a railing over here. Is this handicap ramp should have a railing?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, he almost backed off.
if you're in a wheelchair, you can't come up here.
Then people would trip over the railing,
And then also read.
I had a professor that.
right?
Oh my gosh, I've been saying rename it
You
anything
can only do so much.
since I heard it was named Old 41. When I worked for Jim LaRue, I tried to rename it. They would
So we
nobody
probably
would
need to bring that up. as well.
listen. I said, we're classy. What do you say?
But this one is.
Yeah, mainly because it's the worst name that's ever been given to it.
He has a sense of humor, I take it.
Okay, 1 minute.
That's not that
Probably need to have that too.
You stepped off on it?
Almost did.
No, I almost.
His back was to it. He was kind of inching backwards.
Yeah, we've got it. I think
Okay, let's proceed. Okay, we can start without you. You know, I think I'll do right now, rather than continuing with item number 9, we're going to stop, take a break here, and have the public comment, have all public comments. And I apologize. I should have noticed when so many were leaving that we needed to stop at that time. And I think what we're going to do today is probably decide on having a public comment at the beginning of our meeting and then one at the end, so that when so many people are here, they will get to say something. So with that, let's start the public comment portion.
We also make sure people, so we get the record, have their names printed on the piece of paper. Debbie's holding up one. If you could please fill out one of those papers so we get your spelling and we get it done correctly. You can hand it to me when you come up or after you speak.
Hi there.
Hi.
I'm not used to speaking without something prepared, so I'm going to be rummaging through my notes. I apologize for that. And I never get the microphone at the right level.
Could that mic be turned up some, please?
I do have a soft voice.
it's been like
All
that
right.
for a while.
It has.
Only if Alana hears us.
And these are just comments, not necessarily detractions from what we've been saying. 5A, which is on page 2, talks about controlled substances, weapons, fire, etc. I just want to put another thought on this. And the way you changed it, putting in unauthorized and you leaving it should, I'm okay with that. I just wanted to say that the other thought on that is if a person is evicted, other homeless people throughout the whole country will know that if they come and they are abusing controlled substances, that they will not get in. That might help us turn back or keep others from coming to this area. So I thought that was good that we left it that they would be evicted. So we'll have fewer problems, hopefully.
One of our thoughts was that that we would try not to make whatever facility was established here not be a magnet to attract from everywhere else.
Hear, hear. Just a thought on, it was number 3 of section 6 about the Good Neighbor Plan. I really think that we should do this, have a communication with them, coordination quarterly, not just twice a year, especially in the beginning, because we need to keep our, keep a good feeling about what's going on. I think maybe having somebody from the council even sit on some of their boards, maybe once a quarter. So that's all for that.
So then what would be applicable is looking at number 16. You would change some verbiage in 16 as well. We're calling for annual reporting.
So I'm not seeing, is that page 4?
Page 7.
Page 7.
Oh, okay,
Item
that's in the
16.
different, okay.
So that's where you think that we would have a comment about more than just one meeting or one annual report,
Like quarterly intro.
as well as item 3.
Well, was the annual report based on the 2 times during the year?
I think I may have mentioned that, and maybe that was not in the
Says
plan here.
Meetings with both the city and surrounding community, which shall occur at least twice a year. That was under number 3 on page 3.
Yes, that's right. That's where I got it.
And I guess you were still putting out an annual report. I don't have a problem with the annual report. I just think we need to kind of have our fingers in the pot a little more often than twice a year. That's all.
Okay.
Going on, am I limited to 3 minutes here? Okay.
No.
Going on about the shelter size, just another thought. I was talking with John. The way it reads now, homeless shelters will be limited to a maximum of.
Where are you? Where are you?
This would be at the page 4, number 8 on shelter size and occupancy, number A, or letter A. And do you see?
You want to change it from shelters to shelter?
The shelter will be limited to a maximum of, and my thought is 25 or less beds, but whatever is decided here, but shelter, because I don't think we should just have one shelter in Bonita. And this reads like there can be multi-shelters of 30.
We'll take that under advisement.
And as far as kids, you could limit the age to 6, so not under 6 or under 3, whatever you decide, they wouldn't be counted. They'd probably be sleeping with a parent anyway. The other thought is if it's feasible, you might suggest that preference goes to families rather than just singles. And that may be almost all that I have. I think you lucked out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next.
Good afternoon. My name is Donna Stone. I handed all of you a detailed list, line by line, from the August 21st revisions on the bylaw. And I'm representing Worthington Country Club also. And I want to make one thing really clear. I'm coming from the point of a citizen, not from a city council, not from a planning board. I'm coming from the point of a citizen. And I would like to remind all of you that you are to be protecting us and looking after our needs, and not necessarily the manager or the owner or whoever wants to design this facility or bring one into our town. We're trying to make it as difficult as possible for them to bring a facility into Bonita Springs, and that's where I'm coming from in my comments. Under Section 1, topic intake and discharge of participants, ID checks. Under the bullet point, Bonita Springs residents only, I would like it changed to a resident cannot be discharged from jail, prison, halfway house, or other treatment center to the homeless shelter without being a previous Bonita resident. I brought this up because of a previous speaker at the last meeting who was a former policeman who investigated St. Matthew's House. And in his investigation, he found that over 50% of the people at St. Matthew's House were released directly from prison or jail to St. Matthew's House with no ties to the community whatsoever. So that's not a homeless shelter, that's a halfway house. So this would prevent Bonita Springs from being a dumping grounds for Lee and Collier County prisons and jails. We want to establish, if there is a need for Bonita Springs residents only, that is what this facility is for. And whatever ID is required is to be decided, but be very careful, because it's very easy for a jail or a prison to give a person on discharge an ID to a particular town. They've never been in that town before, but it's very easy for a jail to be able to do something like that. So you have to have a previous residence in Bonita Springs in order to be allowed into a Bonita Springs homeless shelter. Under the bullet point screening, screen for TB, HIV, STDs, and so forth under that heading. I would like it changed to a full health exam is required along with the screening for TB, HIV, and STDs. Again, I'm not really worried about how much it costs the facility to do the screenings and to do the exams. If it's $68,000 per person per year, fine. You're looking out for the citizens. We do not want a TB epidemic like going on up in Jacksonville, Florida right now. We do not want a lot of the other these problems coming into, we're protecting our citizens. And so that's why the requirements for full screening before they're allowed in. So that means a clinic in Lee County someplace has to have this person tested before they're allowed into the Bonita Springs Center, homeless center. As far as intake and discharge, how will it be identified if an applicant is on parole, filtering process? A change that I would recommend is all residents be fingerprinted and screened before admission. No person with a criminal record be admitted. Again, you're protecting the staff, you're protecting the citizens of Bonita. I know this sounds like a very long shot, because most people probably that are homeless have had some sort of a criminal record of some kind. And again, I'm trying to prevent someone being discharged from prison, jail, that has a constant problem with police and law enforcement to be coming into our community and causing additional issues to our residents. Controls, under the heading Controlled Substance, Weapons, Firearms, and Alcohol, I agree with John that no weapons of any kind are to be allowed. The line that restricts size of knife blade to 1.5 inches, if we can't bring that onto a plane, they can't bring it into a homeless shelter. Under the heading of alcohol and narcotics, random drug testing should be done more than once a week. I will agree on the once a week, but they really need to be tested once a week for all drugs. And if they do not pass the test, they're gone. Because, again, this is not a drug treatment place. This is a homeless shelter. There's a difference here. And, you know, as far as setting up programs for the residents, I don't think that that's really, maybe looking for work would be the only, you know, some sort of job placement would be the only thing, but it's not an alcohol treatment plant. It's not a drug treatment plant. It's not a mental facility. This is a homeless shelter, and there's going to have to be rules and regulations to protect the citizens. What if a resident is returns to the shelter intoxicated? Very simple. You change it to no resident will be allowed to return to the shelter if they are intoxicated. This protects the residents, the staff, and the community. These people have to know that there are standards that are very high in order to be able to be maintained in the homeless shelter. Recommended drug screening bullet, 4 residents per week versus 1 per week. I would change it to all residents be tested for drugs weekly. Again, you're protecting the staff, the other residents in the homeless shelter, and the community. And under the heading eviction should result within 24 hours for any misconduct. I would change it again to eviction should result within 8 hours for any misconduct, and this will prevent a resident on the loose with nowhere to go in the middle of the night. But definitely, they need to be removed to a Lee County facility or become a problem of the Lee County up in Fort Myers someplace if they do not follow the rules of Bonita Springs. As far as service for food, under the heading Service for Food, under the purpose of feeding those housed, employed, or visiting a resident, or I would add visiting a resident or volunteering at the shelter. And under the change, no exceptions, catering, limit the number of catering events per year under 12. Absolutely not. The change should be no catering events should be allowed. Again, you're talking about people that have exposure to HIV, to TB, to a lot of different communicable diseases. This is not the type of food you want served to the public. We're talking about health and safety here. Under topic 3, facility characteristics, professional staffing requirements, require Florida state licensing. Will staff need to be licensed? Change that I would recommend is all staff will be required to be licensed by the state of Florida. Under the security and social workers should be armed, I would change it to security staff will be trained in weapons, holding a valid weapons license by the state of Florida, passing a state of Florida licensed defensive training course, and be armed at all times. Only social workers trained in a weapons class, passing a state of Florida defensive training course, and holding a valid weapons license by a state of Florida can be armed. And again, we've just recently seen in the news how a security officer overstepped their bounds and did not follow proper procedures because of improper training over on the East Coast recently. And I think that really we should make sure that anyone carrying a weapon should be properly trained. I would add to that that social workers and medical staff need to be available 24/7. And under the category of that, the change that I would recommend is that social workers must be on staff 24/7. Medical staff must be on staff during admission hours and available 24/7. Under the category of shelter size and occupancy, under the bullet point size, limit the maximum number of shelter beds in the city to ratio of homeless population in Lee County to the city of Bonita Springs population. I would change that to limit the maximum number of beds, shelter beds in the city of Bonita Springs to 25 beds, including all beds in group homes. Suggesting under the bullet head sliding scale based on population with an absolute cap, I would strongly recommend eliminate this altogether and refer to limit maximum of 25 beds in the city of Bonita Springs, including all group homes. And under the bullet point, consider 2 locations at a maximum of 15 beds each. You're getting into a real slippery slope with this, and I would change that to refer to a maximum of 25 beds in the city of Bonita Springs, including group homes. If the 2 homes were allowed, one would have 12 beds and one would have 13 beds for a maximum of total 25 beds in the city of Bonita. But then you're getting into that problem of pods. And in a pod, we don't have any legal rights under the state statute from what I understand. So for example, if at the Burnwood over near the charter school, if they wanted to set up on that property 1 6-bed pod for someone with substance abuse, 1 for mental, 1 for homeless, 1 for drug abuse, 1 for the youth, 1 for unwed mothers, 1 for teens in trouble. You could have any number of pods with a community center in the middle. We would have nothing to say about this. But by limiting the number of a maximum of 25, including group homes and pods, then you are eliminating that possibility from coming into the city of Bonita. And you're protecting the citizens also. Under the heading of modified as A, I won't read that whole passage. Under the homeless shelters will be limited to a maximum of 30. I would change that to homeless residents will be limited to a maximum of 25 Bonita Springs residents. Under the bulletproof rooms, I would change it to add residents will not be allowed to stay beyond 30 days in a 6-month period. So they can't keep coming in and out. They can only come in 30 days within a 6-month period. Under the heading, a 30-bed shelter can be expanded service, but not the number of beds. I would change that again to a 25-bed shelter. Can be expanded, not the number of beds, but services after first going before the LPA for service, use, design, plan, local impact, hours, sound impact, and neighborhood approval. I would add under that also a bullet, no facilities located within 3 miles of another group home, homeless shelter, treatment center, halfway house, pod facility, mental or emotional health care, youth shelter, crisis or attention care facility. Again, you're not allowing pods from being able to come in by putting in the 3-mile limitation. Under section management security plan, under the bullet conduct, add probation of panhandling to rules of conduct. I would change that to any resident of the homeless shelter found panhandling will be removed from the homeless shelter. under the bulletproof ad, that's all it said, was I would change that the homeless shelter will have a monthly meeting with the LPA or city liaison or a community panel of 5 residents. Under the bullet point security, I would add all visitors must be pre-approved. This is exceedingly important, and I would strongly recommend this be put in, that all visitors must be pre-approved for a visit. All visitors will be searched for weapons and drugs. If any drugs or weapons are found, entrance to the shelter will be denied, and the contraband weapons or drugs will then be secured in a lockbox at the shelter and turned over to the police for disposal. And I would also add that a breathalyzer test be administered to all visitors so that no visitors also coming into the facility may be inhibited. Any visitor that fails the test will be denied entrance to the shelter. Under the heading bicycles, parking of bicycles shall be internal, enclosed, screened to the site. I would add that parking of all bicycles will be in a locked, secured, enclosed, screened area on the site. Bicycles are used for barter around this area, so you have to make sure that you're protecting the residents, that their bicycles are going to be secure in there when they get up in the morning. Under the section visitation, limit shelter visitation hours from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. I would change that to limit shelter visitation hours from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. This will allow all visitors to be out of the area before dark. Under the heading limit visitation hours 9 p.m., again, I would change that to eliminate this and refer to previous visitation hours from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Under the heading removal of residents, I would add that any resident found to be in violation of the City of Bonita Springs homeless shelter rules be removed to the Lee County Social Services in Fort Myers. Under the heading encourage use of Lee County, now, if I remember correctly, going back to that previous statement, that there was supposed to be some sort of a transportation vehicle available at all times on the premises. So any resident that is found in violation or is violent or not following any rules, that's how you get them out of Bonita. You don't have to call the police necessarily every single time. You put them in the transportation vehicle and you take them to another facility that would allow that type of a situation up in Fort Myers. Under the heading encourage use of Lee County Social Services in downtown Fort Myers versus clustering of social services in the city of Bonita Springs. Under the heading, is there a plan B if the facility exceeds 30 residents? I would change that the facility will never be allowed to exceed 25 residents.
Ms. Stone, I hate to interrupt, but do you think, I mean, I can read all of these, and that's what you're doing. Can you maybe get more succinct about in limiting? In other words, I look at a paragraph like that. I mean, can you boil that down a little bit?
Well, the reason I'm reading this out loud is for the people that are out here that don't have the copy of this, so that they also have an understanding as to where my comments are coming from, and they may also agree with what I'm saying.
Well, I appreciate that, but do all of you would give up your time to speak, to go through all of these?
I'm almost done. But, you know, and most of these from now on are making the exact same point.
Okay.
Under the continued need for Lee County Sheriff to be responsible for payment. I won't read what I wrote as far as the panel for the citizens, which I think really should be set up. You're stating in one of the things that there should be insurance. Well, like in all insurance policies, for example, car or medical insurance, if you have an ambulance, for example, come to your house, you're charged under the insurance. If you have a car accident, under your car insurance, you're charged a point, and that goes against your insurance. So they're going to have insurance to be able to open up the facility with the city of Bonita Springs. If the police are called, that charge goes against the insurance. It does not come against the residents we shouldn't have to be paying for it. It should go against the facility because they have the incident. It's not the citizens that are having the incident, it's the residents of the homeless shelter. So I think that, I understand the comment that we shouldn't do, you know, the fees of, you know, $100 per incident when someone comes, and then at a maximum of 5 incidents when you reach, that they lose their license. There should be some sort of a fee for every time that the police or an ambulance that is being paid for by the city of Benita to come to that facility. Put it under the insurance, and then that way the city of Benita is covered for all expenses. The police, the ambulance are then covered, and we're not suffering the payments for that. And most of the final comments are all that there is a time frame for every single infraction, and that all time frames must be for any infraction, it must be dealt with within a 30-day period. Thank you very much.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How do you think these facilities should be funded?
Well, that's one of my big questions, is how are they getting their funding? And I'm a little skeptical about where St. Matthew's House is getting their funding from. If over 50% of their residents are being discharged from the prisons or from the jails, they're getting money from the jails to take those prisoners in. So I really have a big problem with where St. Matthew's House gets their funding, and where any homeless shelter would get their funding, unless it's some sort of miraculous donator that's going to come in and donate large sums of money to be able to have a facility like that go. But I really have a big question mark as to where any facility like that gets their money.
I'd like to make one point. Number one, in principle, I agree with most everything you've said. There's one area, and what's the old saying? Don't kill the messenger if you don't like the message. But Audrey gave me the state law, and on group homes, especially 6 beds and less, you can't regulate them by state law.
Well, that's why I specifically
So
said
if you-
within 3 miles of
No, that's-
pods.
Well, no, and the other thing is, I think there is a separation of 1,200 feet is what's required by state law, but I think that's only for group homes of 7 to 15. I wish Audrey was back here. The point I'm trying to make is, if I don't think you can count a legitimate group home beds in against the cap of 25. That's because that's state law.
And that's correct. That,
Yeah.
there's, you know, state licensing, there's federal laws that we have to comply with. And if
Yeah.
I only wish to respond to one other thing, if this lady had, let's say she had to cut her hand, and it was a significant cut, so she called 911.
Right.
911, and I've had this pleasure, look, my husband will probably kill me for talking about it. 911 came to the house, you know, they, or EMS along with the fire, they came up, they took care of him, wrapped him up, so I could then take him to the hospital. I did not, now I do pay taxes, I did not pay, the only time you're going to pay for fire and EMS at this time in this county is if you actually get transport. If they don't have transport, it is the same general services, whether the
That's
person
correct.
is coming to my house, going to your house, Mr. Forbes, or going to another facility. Now, I think Mr. Vincent stated it very well. This might be a point where it might trigger a nuisance if there are so many calls. But it's not something that you can set up an assessment unless it's authorized by state statute.
Well, I think that one of the things that I was talking about was transportation, constant
Transportation will always go for insurance.
Right,
Right.
And hopefully charge for
And
BLS
somebody should
instead of
pay for
ALS.
it.
But
right.
we'll
And
probably overcharge and get a Medicare problem too.
thank you.
She really said it all, I guess. Patricia Zimmerman. 3 things. I really think it should be in the ordinance, only 1 shelter per Bonita Springs. And I also would like to see that number go back down to 20 for the simple reason, if we exclude children under 3, that can bring up the number of facilities quite a lot, because a lot of these women have 3 or 4 kids. And if we exclude the number of children, exclude them from the count, then we can maybe keep it at 20. Isn't it 16 makes it a group home?
Right, anything, and those have special, because the super big group homes, they also
Right.
have certain regulations. So that would take it out of the group home
Right.
problems.
Well, then, to me, keeping it at 20 plus children, we're being charitable to the little kids as well, and can add a little more people to the facility. And the third thing is location. I believe that you have to be so many feet from a school and so on. Could we add residential neighborhoods to that? And could we say maybe 3/4 of a mile or even a mile? Does it have to be the 1,000 or 2,000 feet? No?
Wait, is this from schools?
From schools and residential neighborhoods. I mean, I know that there's the state has a limit of so many feet, but do we have to go by that? Can we put our own in?
I'd have to look at some of the things. Again, community group homes are different than this type of facility. This is something that we were looking at, industrial and commercial. As far as the setbacks, that would be up to the planners to tell me if that would meet reasonable muster, no different than regulating adult entertainment or any other industry. Is this setback makes sense at this location? You know, but I think you're going to have some issues if you find, well, this setback, you know, this is a problem per se, but this is not a problem per se. So be careful, and that's an LPA, you know, judgment that you guys have to do, as well as city council, whether or not it's going to pass a straight face test.
Well, I think that you need to consider residential neighborhoods as well.
Yes, no doubt.
So many
we do.
feet.
Right, and we are not talking about putting this in any residential area.
Well, you know, the Burnwood Estates, there's only a railroad that separates that from Cedar Creek.
I understand. What I'm saying is there's usually a number of setback of what is, you know, correct and what's not. And I'll leave that into the planner's hands to give us guidance of what's done in other areas.
Okay, just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Thank you.
What's been legally withheld. Or upheld.
Hi, I'm Deborah McLean, the publisher of the Banana Peel. I have a couple of subjects.
Your paper?
Oh, I didn't bring it. I'm sorry. I'll fill it out. I have a couple things to talk about. One is, this is, although verbal, I hope recorded, a formal complaint of the contents of the minutes attached to the package for August 16th. They are scrubbed down to nothing and do not reflect what happened at the meeting. The minutes for August 21 are missing entirely. The meeting was not televised, and I think it's important that we begin to list the number of people, especially at August 21, who came in here and voiced their opinion that they do not want a shelter in any form. And because I think that the public deserves to be able to at least access the minutes, and perhaps the videos are too long. I know they're long, the meetings are long. The other thing is, I'd like to explain to you an experience I just had at the library. Today is, Tuesday? On Saturday, I was at the library, and a gentleman was sitting beside me in the back room, and we were both on the internet, and 2 homeless people came in and said, "Hey, buddy, where can I get something to eat? I just got here." So I want you to know our snowbirds are returning. And the gentleman in the chair said, "Well, you can get something to eat over on 41. And he said, "Over there by Perkins?" He says, No, let me draw you a map. "You do have your cell phone." "Yeah, I got the cell phone." The guy behind him in line said, "What cell phone?" Now they're referring to the free cell phones for indigent people. I just want you to know they're back in town, and due to the Cafe of Life, they have a place to eat, and they'll go sleep in the woods. So I wanted to thank the Cafe of Life for that. And then I wanted to say, what else did I have here? I know this is going to hurt your feelings because I can see the level of detail and work. I know that Rex Sims wants to save everybody, and it's just not possible. I believe that this whole exercise is an exercise in mental masturbation, and that we should prohibit entirely homeless shelters, that we should accept the fact that we will be sued, but at least we will have a finite number of money if it's millions, we will know what we have to pay to secure the safety and character of Bonita Springs, and we should pay it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron Pure.
Thank you.
On behalf of TAG, Taxpayer Action Group, this time around, for a particular reason. Thank you, folks, by the way, for opening the door to being able to address the your council here. I hope that will be followed through in the future. There will be lighter times, I'm sure, in your future when it comes to this kind of stuff.
That was my bad.
A quick question, completely off this subject, if that's okay. A quick question. I'd just like to ask if you folks have seen any plans or drawings from anyone at the dog track with the proposed slot machines. Have they presented anything to the local planning board yet?
I haven't seen anything.
Okay. Enough of that. We're going to have more of that, I'm sure. Many things were said today, and I've got a lot of questions. I won't ask them all, but a few of them that just stick out to me. Did I understand Attorney Dolmer to say that the basis by which the calculation was made to arrive at 25 or 30 beds is based on the county homeless population, or projected or current homeless population?
John, I'll let you answer that question.
Well, I'm not an attorney.
I thought you were.
You aren't, okay.
The calculation came from studies that were done on a county-wide basis. And I think the county-wide basis is going to be a little more reliable than a city determination, especially based upon our size. It's easier to get close to the number at a larger geographic level. Then we took the percentage of Lee County's overall population that encompassed Bonita Springs and applied that percentage to the count of the homeless.
Okay, our percentage of population of Lee County then, and you arrived
Applied
at your
that
figure.
percentage to the overall number. Yes,
that doesn't work for me, and I don't think it works for a lot of other folks that are acquainted with arithmetic or math or surveying and so on. Our demographic is a hell of a lot different here than it is in other places. And also, I think you were quoted as having said that there were 22 homeless people in Bonita Springs, without mentioning how you arrived at the conclusion. It almost sounded to me when I read the newspaper that you shook hands with 22 homeless people in Bonita Springs. That was not the case, obviously. Okay, this tax situation is really interesting. To my knowledge, Bill of Rights, the Constitution, whatever, deals with our country being open with respect to religions. Freedom of religion and so on, and hence we give religious organizations, I think, special consideration if they locate within our town, city, or what have you.
The opposite. Constitutionally, we're prohibited from giving any aid to any church in the state of Florida. Now, that is a constitutional amendment coming up in November.
Very good. And part of that is also our giving money to a religious group.
Governments
is that
are
correct?
prohibited.
That's
from
correct.
giving
That's
money
correct.
to-
That's correct. It'll be an interesting outcome, I'm sure. However, why would we, if there's special or different treatment, as Audrey just referred, to religious organizations, why are we sitting here discussing allowing a homeless shelter, which will pay no property tax, to the city of Bonita to locate here? It was also discussed earlier, and I got into the tail end of the conversation, I guess, was the gal an attorney or someone who was surveying the area for us with respect to what are the policies of other cities?
That's one of our planners. That's Ms. Genson.
Okay. Well, I thought that she had said that, and I think if one of you folks or more of you asked the question, what what exactly are they doing with respect to handling the issue of homeless shelters locating in their city? And I think I heard her say they're looking at us at this point.
I heard that too.
We're leading the way. We're the guinea pig so far, so to speak. And I would suggest that we take the initiative, or make the initiative, and lead the way, and challenge, as I did at the last meeting, the very idea of a homeless shelter located in the city that we incorporated 10 or 12 years ago with a purpose of guiding our own destiny. Now, there are a lot of people in this city, and you've been confronted by many of them, that want no part of a homeless shelter here. We're not heartless. We've already endured, or already endure, the fact that there are 30 or 35 social service agencies in the city and so on. So why would we want to go against what you folks have been hearing constantly for a long period of time now, those wishes of people that want to avoid this situation? Also recommended at that time was putting an advisory question on the ballot. I would go as far as to put 2 advisory questions on the ballot. One that bespeaks that which you are now pursuing in getting the language together to justify or to oversee the operation of a homeless shelter. The other would merely ask a simple question. Do you want a homeless shelter to locate in Bonita Springs? I'd like to hear Audrey respond to that, by the way. Is there a prohibition? I mean, are we not able to do that, Audrey?
Actually, I think I wrote a memorandum after the last workshop on that. I don't remember if I shared it with the LPA, if you received a copy of it. I did send it to City Council. It's illegal under state statutes.
What is? An advisory question?
A referendum on anything relating to comprehensive planning or development orders. And the memorandum goes into effect explaining the case law on it, where it was permitted. They changed the law in 2011. It used to be if it was more than 5 or more, affected 5 or more parcels, you were legally allowed to do it. They changed it so that it's now prohibited on any, but they grandfathered in any that existed prior to that as far as in city charters. And then it also explained, after I talked to special counsel Beverly Grady, who's the attorney I've retained to assist me on this matter, to keep in mind what we call the Pottinger cases. So I'm glad Mr. Pure brought this up, which is whatever regulations that you create on the homeless, remember, it will reflect on what regulations, it correlates, what regulations that you can create for your parks and recreation, for your use of your rights of way. So if you say you are prohibiting homeless shelters, or if you're saying you're making it difficult for homeless shelters, or you cannot have outdoor camping prohibitions, you cannot have prohibitions on others, and that goes in the federal court cases called Pottinger, and I outlined it in the memorandum. I'll make sure we send you one, a copy of the
I
memorandum.
appreciate that, but we're not talking about those kind of other agencies that you spoke.
Well, we're talking about cities adopting ordinances, and we're talking about cities adopting ordinances. We have to look at how the courts will look at those ordinances. And that includes under comprehensive planning and local planning agency. That's why we're here, and that's why City Council asked for you to look at things, why we cannot do referendums, as well as caution at the bigger picture. You know, it's great. I've heard some wonderful things from residents, but some of them are thinking of the very focused, you know, they're seeing homeless as a particular type of person, and those people do exist. I'm not disagreeing with those people, but I think they're being a little all-inclusive as far as trying to describe them so that there are other people that fall within those categories. And that's what I think Mr. Mills was bringing up earlier. You need to be careful when drafting this so that you don't put some group, like our mother's home, in that category by accident, because you don't want to put, I'm going to make that presumption, you don't want to put a group like Our Mother's Home into that presumption.
Audrey, I'm still not clear.
That's the overbreadth doctrine.
I'm still not clear on one thing. I'm talking about not mounting the ordinance or proposed ordinance at a referendum. I'm talking about an advisory question.
I'll tell you what, I have the memorandum, you're welcome to it. If you wish, the citizens pursuant to the charter always have the right to do a petition. If they wish to do a petition pursuant to the ordinance we adopted and pursuant to the charter, and they feel they meet the state law, go ahead.
Wait a second. What ordinance that you adopted? The ordinance that's being discussed at this point?
2005 as to petitions.
Okay.
What the content, how
Now-
to fill out a petition.
Okay, now you'd agree, though, that in the past, you've come up with case law and memoranda that refer to different things along the way, over the years.
I have followed the direction of
then-
city council, sir.
I'm not talking about you're not following the direction
I
of
have
city
followed
council.
the
I'm talking
direction, I'm
about
agreeing with you.
other
matter.
legal, well, no, other legal documents that kind of bring an equilibrium to what you may have offered to those on council. For example, there was a recent one having to do with, the heck was it? I think it was Councilman Lockhart that pointed something out to you, and he had quoted, instead of your memoranda or your opinion, he had referred to something that was from the Attorney General.
No, I gave him some, he asked for some additional research that I
Correct.
did not send a memorandum on. I provided him that research in my
Okay.
office.
Well, are we
Excuse
ruling
me,
out-
I'd
are
like
we
to-
ruling
I'd
out-
like to
Are
interrupt
we ruling
here.
out an advisory question, or is that what we're doing here? by
We don't
virtue of
want
what you
debate.
know?
We're ruling out a city-initiated referendum,
Illegal. No doable.
not recommended.
Not recommended, but doable.
I'm not going to say it's doable because
Okay.
there's a city on the other coast right now with a $65 million lawsuit
okay.
as a result of a
Mr.
referendum.
Pierre, let's continue on.
Now, with respect to the tax-free business, that this organization would be so with respect to property taxes, where do we stand there? Or where do we stand with the state constitution, or for that matter, the federal constitution with respect to what powers we have as citizens, and you as extensions of us?
And there are state statutes as to whether a group is applicable for a tax exemption. Since we're talking about some group that is undefined here, I do not know if the group, if it's a religious organization, would fall under a tax exemption or not. But those are state statutes. It's not something the city can control.
Okay. I would still pursue the concept of an advisory question on the ballot, do so post haste. If January, I heard mentioned from Audrey at a meeting or somewhere along the line, is the aim, then why not do it and get a real sense of what folks out there are thinking? Put what you folks are in front of their face, and put the concept of not having a homeless shelter in the city also there. And I think that we will, in the end, all be winners as far as the situation is concerned. And I thank you for your time and your ears.
Thank you.
Deb Harrop, Bonita Springs. This has all been a very interesting exercise. I've followed it since the beginning. And I think what I've gained from it is that I feel there is no way to sufficiently regulate a homeless shelter as we know them to ensure the safety and character of the city. And if indeed we are talking about the care, I mean, I think every community should care for its less fortunate. If we're talking about the number of homeless in Bonita Springs is somewhere between 20 and 30, and we already have group home ordinances and laws that go up to 15, then why are we talking about homeless shelters at all? Why don't we say no homeless shelters in Bonita Springs? The care of the homeless and other less fortunate population should be done through a group home setting. Seems to be not only better for the community, but it is highly regarded in social service venues as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Dick Durfone from Highland Woods. I watch this, and I've watched municipal governments for years go through things. Where is the hue and cry in the community to create this homeless shelter? It doesn't exist. I don't think there's anybody here that says we have to have this shelter. 5, 10, 15, 20 beds. There's nobody here. There's been a couple of occasions we've been at meetings, people have said, well, we wouldn't mind having one. There has been no hue and cry from anywhere in the community that says we need this shelter. This started with somebody coming in wanting to, in my opinion, enhance their business. St. Matthew's House wanted to come in through the development order and have a facility built that they could come in and move. I look at it now as like the tail wagging the dog. Okay? You guys are the dog. The tail's gone. And we're still wagging. Why do we look at all of these legal issues that, we have to worry about being sued on this law, this housing ordinance, all these things that we have to investigate and research? Mm-hmm. Why are we doing that when the community doesn't want it? Okay? There is some reason in the background that's driving this, and I have yet to hear anybody say what is driving why we need to have this shelter in the community. I'd love to hear it from somebody.
I can answer that.
Okay, please.
We are not advocating a homeless shelter.
Okay.
We're acting under the instructions from the city council to create the rules and regulations should one exist.
Okay.
That's why you see all you see.
Okay. Well,
there are also 4 planned developments in the city that have social service group 3 listed, so you can not have an ordinance and let them build as they wish, or you can have an ordinance and provide some sort of control in place to ensure consistency and compatibility. That's your choice.
But we can also have an ordinance that does not allow a homeless shelter and allows those other agencies to exist, correct?
Actually, since it's already permitted in 4 planned developments within the city, either you adopt standards or you do not adopt standards. That's up to the city council. If they do adopt standards, then you have standards. If they do not adopt standards, you have no standards.
They go by the existing standards in the Development Standards Ordinance. So we look at building code, we look at plumbing, we look at stormwater, we look at how the building looks from the outside. And my guess is that's probably unsatisfactory to most residents, that if we get an application, they're going to want stricter regulations. But if you don't have regulations, you can't do I say so without having something.
Okay. So you're saying it's impossible for the city of Bonita Springs to say that we do not want to have a homeless shelter?
You could work on changing the regulations so that further locations would not be permitted. But the fact of the matter is you have 4 locations within the city that are permitted right now.
That have the existing zoning, so they don't have to go before council. They do not have to go before the zoning board. They're allowed to turn in their paperwork. And at that, well, other than the fact we have a moratorium right now, but turn in their paperwork, and we are required to process that paperwork because that's what the Constitution requires. We're required to give everybody due process. Okay. So if we have regulations, we can then process it in accordance to those regulations. If we do not, we have to process it in accordance with what regulations we have, and we will look at if we don't do anything, and that's council's prerogative, that's LPA's prerogative, that's citizens, we will process it in accordance with the laws that we have on the books.
Dick, if I could also add, I think that in the St. Matthew's case, we had a piece of property that was zoned for that use. And John, I believe you're saying those 4 are zoned for that use. And when it's zoned for that use, then you can put on that property what it's zoned for. So you're going a little bit deeper here, I think, in the whole issue of what may be driving all of this stuff, and it starts with the zoning of a piece of property. Okay. And that zoning process, Audrey, if I may say, it includes the public.
Right. That's correct. The public would have had their right to a hearing back in, was it 1993? In 1993. Well, the residence, Cedar Creek wasn't built yet. Most of Pelican Landing wasn't built yet. Bonita Bay was more insulated. The other residents, Bonita Village, there was, and I believe there was some outcry in Bonita Village in the zoning case in 93. So, I mean, and also understand that when the planners were doing this, when the people in Lee County were doing this, They normally would allow, if nobody had objections to it, they would look at what the conventional zoning was on the land. So if it was IL or it was a general commercial or whatever category, they allowed all the schedule of uses unless there was some use that was particularly objected to by the public at that meeting. You know, and then they would take out, no different than what we do. We take out that use. If we know nobody wants it, we know the developer doesn't care, and the developer says, sure, take it out, we just scratch it off. And that's normally what happens during the zoning process. What we're telling you is, I didn't know there's 4, I thought there was 2, but there are 4 pieces of property that have social services group 3. And social services group 3 allow facilities for indigent persons, which is what we use the term homeless shelters today, but that was what it was said in the social services section. And if we don't do something, which is fine, we don't have to do something. If people feel putting their head under the sand is the correct answer, it's easier to staff, I'm not going to object to it. You know, I've taken a lot of hits on this. You know, we can do that, but if an application comes in that we have to process, we're going to be mandated to process it in accordance with what laws we do have in effect.
I think the human cry that you're talking about really should start with, it does start with this board here in terms of how the property is zoned. What can we build on it? If there are complaints or if there is a need for not having a homeless shelter here, then we've got to take a look at what is zoned now and address the issue back at the beginning. If it's not zoned for that use, you can't get it to be zoned that way unless you go to the city council for a special exception. And that's all a process. So if we have some concerns about this thing pushing forward, I think you have to back up to that point. But when you do, you're asking a landowner then to say, well, we want you to give up your rights for this. So it's not just the council, it's not just us, it's a landowner, an individual who owns a piece of property. And maybe he wants to sell it, maybe his family wants to sell it, but they want everything in that zoning. So you're starting back at really day one or point one with this thing, but I think zoning is a real issue that we're facing here.
I'd like to add 2 points to piggyback on what Sam has said. Number one, and Audrey correctly said, this all started back in the 90s, and it was Lee County, wasn't City Council. Now, there's a couple things. Number one of the things that John has mentioned that's in the planning, in the rewriting of the land development code and all that, is that even though there's those 4 properties that are zoned to where you could build a homeless shelter on them now, by what is being proposed, if it makes it all the way through and City Council passes it, any property owner that would want to build a homeless shelter on one of those 4 sites would be required to submit a plan development. It's a community development, and then they would have to go through zoning, and they'd have to be approved by a supermajority, 5 of your 7 current sitting or city council or future city council to get that approved. Then if you couple that with, and this is kind of up in the air, I'm in favor of either the 25 or the 20 or 30, one shelter based on the population we have now. And in order, you'd have to double the city before you got to do another one. A tough ordinance that's got a lot of good things that protects the public. That's what we're trying to do. That now, City Council, even if Audrey advises them not to do it, if they want to pass something that says no homeless shelters, period, they have that right. LPA doesn't have it. What we're doing is just what was explained earlier. We're doing what City Council has asked. We do have some differences of opinion on some things, but we are trying to do what they've asked. So that, I don't know if I helped you or confused you.
Part of this planning of the LPA in their recommendation to the City Council, like it was mentioned before, what were all the comments, the public comments from the last meeting on the 21st were not included in the packet for this time, correct?
I don't think we have minutes ready yet.
The 21st is going to be addressed at the next meeting. We took this as the first workshop that we're discussing today from the 16th.
Oh, I thought it covered both meetings by the memo that you...
Well, we put it in there in case we got to it, but it...
Okay, I saw it in there, and I wondered why that information was missing, okay? One point I'd like to fall back on, too, is we have requirements in the city of Bonita Springs for someone to utilize services to come in here and apply for something. You have to be a resident, correct? Is it nothing that's required to be a resident? I'm trying to think off the top of my head. In my city, it used to be buying a village sticker or doing these types of things. They had to prove that you're a resident. Without some type of requirement of people coming, of people being a resident at one point in time, in some type of a fashion in Bonita Springs, someone from Gainesville that's homeless in Gainesville can say, you know what? Oh, October, time to go south. Where am I going to go?
Right.
And they can come down here and they can live in this shelter off of something that again falls back on the funding things. I think it's critical that we hook these people somehow back into the community.
Right.
That's critical.
One of the things that Donna presented about saying that no one could be admitted if they had been in jail within a certain period of time, there is a map that was prepared, I think, based on your research and somebody from Spanish Wells, that shows that these former inmates that come into St. Matthew's House came from all over the state of Florida, up at the Panhandle, all the way down to Keys.
Correct. That was my documents, and I had given them to John, and I would hope they were forwarded to you.
And I would compliment you on how good a job you did.
Okay. That's if there's one element that falls into this whole package, I don't want a homeless shelter in here, but if there was a homeless shelter here to treat Bonita Springs people, well, okay, then that's what we have to do.
I think we've been trying to write the regulations that we're obliged to do.
Okay.
To do exactly what you're saying.
Okay.
If we're going to have a facility here, we should support Bonita Springs with that facility. We should not be a magnet to draw them from all over the state.
Correct. And what I've heard a couple of times so far mentioned is that we can't. In your earlier comments, John, my impression sitting in the audience was that we can't say it's just Bonita Springs because we don't know what to ask for identification or how long do they live here or
It's possible. I don't think it's as effective. I mean, my personal opinion is you're better served by limiting the number of beds. But that, like I said, is a personal opinion, and this board can disagree, and you can disagree.
I disagree. It's not the number of beds, because you're basing the number of beds on Lee County, and there's a lot of areas of Lee County that are a heck of a lot different than Bonita Springs itself. I don't think that's a good comparison to use, my opinion.
I think those are the most accurate numbers that we can come up with, and no one has given me anything any better.
Okay. Now, there was a survey done in Bonita Springs itself, you said, but that wasn't reliable, right?
That was, I believe the Sheriff's Department had done an informal look at it. I haven't seen anything that's more accurate. If I see something that's more accurate, I have no problems bringing it forward and suggesting that this is a more accurate form of information. But to date, that's the best I have.
Okay. But there was a study done based on just Bonita Springs of how many, and I can't remember the location. I read an article in one of the newspapers about it.
I think it was several years ago, and the Sheriff's Department had gone out to take a look, and they had gone to certain places to do a count.
So I would rely a lot more on the Sheriff's Department looking at what's going on in Bonita Springs than what all of Lee County is doing and applying math to it and saying that's fine. That's I think that is a crux of what a lot of people behind me out there are concerned about is, okay, serve Bonita Springs residents. But we don't want the releasees that, again, I think it was 50 some, and I can't remember the exact number, over 50% of the people released to St. Matthew's House in Naples had nothing to do with that. That was their address. Another one was released 3 days ago. A convicted career criminal, that's his new address, is St. Matthew's House. And this happens every day, every week. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next. Okay, if there's no one else, does the board have any comments? All comments?
I think we were on how many shelters and,
Just a couple of odds and ends here. First, I think maybe Victor was referring to the HUD study that came out in the Spotlight. I think it was last fall, or 2011. I'm not sure. It identified 36 homeless in Bonita, of which none were families with children. So the other thing I gleaned from a policeman in this area is that most of the homeless in Bonita do not want to be in a shelter. They have various reasons for preferring to live off of the land. One of them, in some cases, when they are people who are sending money home, they are people who have jobs who are sending money home, maybe to Mexico or Guatemala or some country like that, and they don't want to take that extra money that they would spend on shelter because St. Matthew's House requires like $50 a month for people who are living there. They don't want to take that money and give it to the shelter. They want to send it home to their family, where $50 is a lot more than it is here. Okay, some other little notes.
First, if I could, let me ask you a question. In that study, did they determine how many of those people were Bonita people?
These were Bonita people.
They've lived here.
It was the
many
HUD
years?
yearly point-in-time survey. So it doesn't mean those people are there all year. It just means that when they looked, I think it was in the fall time frame, when they looked, they were there. Dude, I'm looking to John. Maybe he knows something more. It was in the spotlight.
It was,
And he may be here. He was here.
but based on how I looked at it, I thought the information that was on the county actually produced a lower number, and the way they had calculated the information was more accurate. It wasn't anything for or against the HUD study, but like all studies, it's performed for a reason. And the reason that that one was performed, and don't ask me to quote it off from memory, was not necessarily consistent with what we were looking for.
But that's if you choose a ratio to determine.
That's exactly right, and we don't have to choose a
We don't
ratio.
have to choose that. You can say if there's a definitive study that says it's 35, then if we want to believe that, then that's the number we might use.
That's still a low number. And I prefer the lower number, that's John's number. Yeah, there are snowbird homeless population.
I think you were trying. I was getting at this definition of a homeless person being a Bonita resident. I mean, exactly what does that mean?
Well, you ask, were they Bonita? They were living in Bonita.
Did they have a home here? They were kicked out of a home. Now they're homeless.
No, I don't believe that. I think that they. I don't.
The community?
Yeah,
I don't think there was anything said in this article that I read whether they were really Bonita residents. They were Bonita residents by way of being homeless in Bonita.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to clear up for myself is we keep talking about a Bonita homeless person. I'd like to know really what that is. What determines that? Who determines that?
Everybody wants to know that answer. So, just a couple more things. Just some general fears that I think the population in Bonita have. One of them is that we fear that social services will tend to cluster in one area. Right now we're talking about, we were talking about the area in the Burnwood Park plus the Cafe of Life around the banyan tree. They're not so far from each other. My understanding is that most of the population now of Bonita is out towards 75 in those communities. I would hate to see all of the social services cluster in the older part of the city. That would be highly unfair, and that's up to you guys to protect us. The other thing somebody mentioned is about the prisoners and so on, and people who would be predators and danger to our community. I just hope that you, in writing this ordinance, will keep a vigilance on that so that we can keep our shelters as clean as possible. And when I say clean, without the predators. And that's for the safety of the people in the shelter, not just the residents in the community. That's one of the main fears of shelter residents, is that they're preyed upon by other people in the shelters. The other thing is, I believe that the location of shelters needs to be as far as possible from neighborhoods, schools, etc. I mean, like at least a half a mile, maybe a mile. it's just very important for neighborhoods to feel safe. And I have talked to John too about having shelters near liquor stores and so on. I think that that's a bad thing, getting them too close. You can imagine why. The other thing I wonder, and maybe Audrey will have, I've had discussions with her on this, is will this ordinance cover any churches who want to set up shelters on their property? Maybe even inside their churches themselves, like rooms in the lower parts of the churches. I guess she can answer that later.
Want me to answer?
Well, unless anybody else knows the answer.
Yeah, I would believe churches would be treated the same as any other applicant. I would hope to do it that way. The thing that concerns me, and we talked about this, is the fear that somebody builds a large church, and churches are permitted on any zoning district. We don't, I think some need special exceptions in residential, but for the most part, churches can go anywhere. That's why most of the churches, the zoning board's more familiar with this. They have AG2 zoning and they just get special exceptions for what they need. The concern is that they would try to make the argument that that is a substantial part of their religion. Now, when I talk churches, I'm probably not talking about your traditional mainstream religions, but there are churches of the transients, that are out there, and they sue on the basis of First Amendment, of our LUPA. Now, I will tell you, if you write a time, place, manner ordinance, you'll stay out of the First Amendment problems. But once we start playing with certain First Amendment things, that may go out the window. Then the ordinance goes under the strict scrutiny standard. Once it goes into the strict scrutiny, nobody can defend it. So you want to always write something that is very content neutral as to who the applicant is.
Okay. Okay.
help?
It does. It
I
does.
think-
And I know we've sort of had some discussions on this before, because there was another case where it was actually happening and the church was suing because they wanted to have a shelter.
Well, remember, when they sue, they're going to sue on 25 grounds. It'll be whatever mud sticks. So, I mean, and it will be,
Sure.
if we're in that situation. So, I mean, there'll be 10 counts, 15 counts, 25 counts. And, each one of those need to be addressed methodically.
Well, I think at times like this, when these topics come up, the future land use map is a very important document. And no one pays attention to that until we get to this point. So if the community would get involved and take a look at that plan, I think they could see, and that's the reason for the plan. It's supposed to be a plan that says this is where we're going with development. If that's not right, we'll have these kinds of meetings forever. So I think the community could do itself a favor by looking at that carefully and questioning.
Absolutely, along with the fact that sometimes maps need changes. I've talked to many residents who believe things should be a snapshot the day it existed, and how dare you adopt any new rules. And I've had council members paralyzed with fear of adopting something because of one sentence in a document. Instead of saying, let's work on that one sentence, let's just vote no for the whole thing. And that doesn't do anything to improve the community. Maybe fixing that sentence might, because John and I aren't going to, and Jackie are not going to know every different idea and what should be done. But, when we get the wholesale, let's just kill the messenger person, that really is, and I'm not accusing you or anything, that's not productive.
Well, I think the catalyst here for council to look at this sort of issue is that plan. It's a catalyst. Say, okay, we see we have a problem with homeless shelters. Well, maybe next year it's something else.
Sure.
And we
That was
don't
one of
have
my
a
last
way of
comments.
addressing it. And the only way to address that carefully, I think, is in this plan. And not enough is said or discussed about that future land use plan.
Always needs to change. Which
Yes.
I'm just going to bring up one subject real quick, and that is we received the letter from Florida Department of Economic Opportunity. Just to let you know, we did find out that the ORC report on the recent transmittal The objections, recommendations, and conclusions, no comments whatsoever on the proposed amendment. So that'll be coming before you and City Council, and that's on the agriculture. Sorry for the short plug there.
Okay.
Okay. I think just a couple more short things.
Okay.
We talked a little bit earlier, and Audrey kind of nixed this on the referendum, and I'm glad for that. And I think I made my point clear before that a referendum would really be unfair to those who are opposed to the shelter. My experience has been there's a lot of media and a lot of people with a lot of money that are favorable to the shelter. And when Be Safe has tried to address this in the newspapers and go into homeowners associations and talk to the community associations, etc., we have not been allowed to do it because it's too political. We've had a terrible time getting out our viewpoint and telling people the facts, because we are dealing with facts. So we have not been able to get our viewpoint out to the general public, but there are churches in the area that seem to have the viewpoint of being favorable to the shelter and have a huge, maybe 2,000, 4,000 person congregation to speak to from the pulpit. And then, of course, as I said, the newspapers and other media, where I've written many, many letters to the editor, and I had only about half of them published. So we are at a disadvantage. That's all I'm going to say.
That's why we want to hold these meetings, so you can speak.
Thank you. I'm almost done. And the last thing I just wanted to say is, remember, and I think Audrey pointed this out, we still have that development order sitting, waiting, and waiting, and waiting, and we don't know what's going to happen. Some of us can speculate, but we don't know. We could still have a shelter, so maybe the ordinances that we're writing might do us some good. So,
thank you very much.
To you all.
Be your only hope.
It would be our only hope. You're right, Fred.
It would happen to get built. That's the best thing you can have, is a good operating order.
Right. I'm with the people who would like the city council to say no. But I recognize exactly what Fred said. It may be our only hope.
Well, it could come about even against the wishes of city council, Audrey, John Domer. It could be some kind of a mandate. So if we were to get a shelter, whether it was with our free will or against it, having a good operating ordinance is very important. And from my point of view, the good operating ordinance is to protect the public.
Absolutely.
Not to protect the operator.
Okay, and I'm going to leave with the last question that maybe Sam touched on. I actually have two things. My husband's back there saying, "Oh gosh." Just curious about. John said there were 4 places in the city where we could have a shelter, and my worry is we're considering maybe moving the library. I don't know whose land that's on. Hopefully it's city land. But that could be a place for a shelter to move into if they decide to move the library.
Next to a school.
I'm sorry?
It's next to a school.
It's right next door to a school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the library site is owned by Lee County government, and it's kind of imploded within a city-owned property. So unless the city decide, I'm sure the county would surplus it to the city. If the library moves, it would not be something that they would be able to put out for sale. I'm hoping they wouldn't do that, and that the city would use that facility. My guess is city council using it as a homeless shelter would be close to nil.
Good. Good.
Yeah, hey, I never.
Well, yeah, that was my fear now with all this talk about the library. And by the way, a new library would be wonderful. But my last thing, honest. You talked about other things down the line. And I guess somewhere in the near future, we should address things like adult entertainment And maybe,
We have an ordinance.
oh, you do, okay, and the perennial, that keeps coming up, the fish cannery and the heavy, really, really heavy industrial places in some of those areas that are so near neighborhoods and schools. All right. Thank you so much for being patient.
That's mine, thank you.
I am done. Thank you.
Deborah McLean. The issue is zoning, and I know that a lot of work is being done on Chapter 4 and zoning. The problem is the mutability of needs. What is a current need? So my question will be, when we finalize Chapter 4, and we have 4 sites of uses for homeless shelters that we don't like, there may surface some other uses under other uses that we want to get rid of. So how do we correct the errors of the past? They weren't really errors. Well, how do we correct what is currently not compatible with the character of the city? We have to take a stance on this. Nobody really wants lawsuit, but it may end up that way. To say to someone, okay, you have 2 years and that's it. And we talked about 5 years, then there was go back before, and then 2 more years, and then 7 years, and stretching out these development orders because of the economy. And we have just learned that development orders or zoning can hurt a community. So this needs to be able to, we need to be able to take hold of zoning in all aspects and sunset it quickly. Either they have their zoning, they flip the property, or they build on it. But their zoning can no longer be permanent because our cities change so quickly. So I don't know how you're going to address the need for current zoning, how you're going to tie that into Chapter 4, that it be current. And I understand that the operating ordinance is something that has to be written, but I still think the city fathers should say no. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Why don't we set the next meeting, and I guess it has been set here, for September 20th. It was tentative, but is there a question about that?
That's fine with me.
Okay, then let's set the next.
At 2:30?
September 20th.
At 2:30?
No, that's a
8:30?
regular.
8:30 a.m.?
It's a regular meeting at 8:30.
It's 8:30 on the 20th?
Yes.
8:30.
I'd rather do, okay. So I'll plan on that. So I'm going to redo it to October.
Okay.
So I can do it faster.
And the next item is approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Do I have a second? Okay, that is passed. Approved?
Aye.
It's passed. Okay, I'd like to adjourn. It's now 5:09.